Well, hello and welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. English musician John Bobin may not be a household name in the annals of music history, but that doesn't discount the fact that he's been quite busy, the busy musician, playing bass and adding vocals with various groups and lineups throughout the 60s and 70s, and even today. Beginning in 1960, John had already cut his teeth on several bands before joining the Fingers in 1965. Although the band didn't actually record an official album, there were a few singles released on disc in the mid-60s. Some have found their way onto various artist compilations in more recent times. Fast forward to 1971, and John found himself playing on the second album by Mickey Jupp's Legend. And let's not forget all of the artists and bands that John has played in support of over the years. It's a long list, and hopefully we'll have time to discuss a few. But wait, that's not all. Like one of those infomercials. John is also a writer. He's written 5 books to date, all with proceeds donated to charity. And guess what? John is still playing music today. His current band is called The Management. Well, welcome, John. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi there. Yes, it's nice to still be playing at 26.
Well, I have to commend you on that. As always, I like to go back to the beginning. And so you were born in Southend-on-Sea in Essex, correct?
Yes, that's right. In what they call the famous Thames Delta now because of Dr. Feelgood and that crew.
Oh, okay. All right. And well, tell me a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing there.
Well, I was actually living in a place called Southchurch, which is a part of Southend, not very far from the what they call the sea, laughingly, but actually it's an estuary and it's more like Southend on mud most of the time. It was a very nice place to live in those days, and I can remember actually in 1953 there was a big flood, and the Canvey Island was flooded very badly, and the flood came halfway up our road. So that's one of my earliest memories anyway.
Ooh.
That was obviously a long time before I picked up a bass.
Well, was there a lot of bailing going on? How did you get did the water subside? What happened there?
Well, luckily we lived on a hill, so the water decided to stop halfway up the hill. It wasn't a very steep hill, but just enough to stop it. But there was quite some damage along the seafront at that time.
Okay, all right. Well, that's good that you survived that. What is your earliest music that you remember hearing in the household?
My parents gave me 78, and it was Spike Jones and his City Slickers.
Okay.
A sort of a jazz fun band, really. They recorded all sorts of comedy things, and it was that old Black Magic. So if ever you have a few moments to waste, listen to them because they are funny, actually. So it might not be your musical taste, but it will give you a laugh. That was my very first record anyway. It was just given to me presumably because they were fed up with it.
There was a lot of that early the comedy mixed with music.
Yes, people like Phil Harris and people like that.
Right.
The Purple Beetle Eater, and later on, of course, things like They're Coming to Take Me Away, which is a record you couldn't possibly make nowadays. And I'm sort of ashamed to admit that I did that on stage in the Fingers.
Did you really?
But only sort of ashamed.
Only a little bit.
Just a little bit, yeah.
What was the audience?
Don't mind me having a cup of tea, do you?
Oh, no, not at all. If that's all that's in there is tea, right?
Yes.
What was the audience reaction to Purple People Eater? Do you remember?
Well, I used to, for some strange reason or other, I borrowed a teacher's gown from one of my schoolmasters, which was one he was going to throw away, and a top hat. And I used to throw twigs at the audience. So, I wasn't really taking things that seriously. But I do remember one day that a slightly larger twig than normal hit a very big rugby player in the back. And at the end of the gig, I was squatting behind two Selma Goliaths, which were stacked high, and he came to have a friendly word with me. And luckily, our singer said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you've just missed him. He's gone home." So
Ooh, that was a close one. Yeah. Well, what artists or bands did you like as a teen growing up?
well, the first group I really liked was the Shadows. And you probably know that before the Beatles, the Shadows was the most popular band in the UK, and they also backed Cliff Richard. I wasn't that keen on Cliff Richard, although he's a pretty good singer and he's done very well for himself. It was the Shadows that I liked, and I remember the first record I ever bought was Apache, which most people of my age have played many times. And in fact, our first band was a band called the Phantoms, and we played all Shadows stuff, and we gradually started to get into the Beatles and a little bit of blues and Beatles stuff. But our first influence was definitely Hank Marvin and the rest of the Shadows.
Oh yeah.
Lots of well-known instrumental bands, and in fact, I played with a guy called Rhett Stoller. He recorded some very early instrumentals, and I was one of the first people to do double tracking and to use echo effects, so along with Hank, obviously. So that was a good influence to me because he was a lot older than me, and he gave me some good advice about how to interact with audiences. In fact, one of the guys in the band, Bob Heath, good friend of mine, great singer and a very good guitarist, Rhett said to him, "You have to look at the audience." Bob was a little bit shy and used to stand side on to the audience.
You mentioned the Outlaws. Richie Blackmore was in the Outlaws, right?
Yes, he was. Yeah. They had various different lead guitarists, but one of them was a guy called Roger Mingay, and I think he comes from South Africa, but he was in the band with a musician that I worked with a lot called Trevor Morgan in the very early days. So it's a very small world, really.
Well, when did you first start playing bass?
Well, I was given a guitar and a very small amp, which was a half a watt, so not that loud. And I started to do just parties and youth club gigs with a friend of mine, Mark Mills, who was playing rhythm. I was playing guitar for about 6 months, and then somebody who was a much better guitarist joined the band, my friend Lefty, Ken Leftwich. So I switched to bass. To be honest, I've not really looked back. I wanted to be Jet Harris, like a lot of bass players did at the time. And I asked to be called Ace at school, but our drummer, who was also at the same school, told people it would be funny if they called me Face instead.
Face.
But Lefty and I formed a band called The Management about 9 years ago, something like that. And that band is still going with different people. And poor Lefty, unfortunately, isn't with us any longer. But we got some great guys in the band, and we're still enjoying doing 50s, 60s, and early 70s stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it is. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. But
yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's I commend you, like I said, for still being active in music. Okay, let's talk about your first band, the very first band that you were a part of.
That was the Phantoms with Lefty and Bob Clouter on drums. Bob was later on in other bands. He and I have been in about 5 or 6 bands together, including Legend and the Fingers. We used to do youth clubs, things like that, and a few parties and things, and we did some talent competitions. Didn't win any. We played at Holly Camp as well. The band was going for about 3 years, I think, from 61 to 64. Okay. And we had a good time. We enjoyed it. One of the places we played was the Shades, which is a coffee bar in Southend. Was a coffee bar in Southend, which was owned by Robin Trower's dad.
Oh.
And the Paramounts used to play there. At the time, it was Robin Trower, Barry Wilson, Diz Derrick, and Gary Brooker. So a big learning curve for me, because at the time they were doing rock and roll and blues, and later on some Ray Charles and James Brown stuff, and I'd been doing more poppy things. But that, and also Mickey Jupp and the Orioles, they really steered me in a different direction. So,
oh yes.
And of course, the Paramounts more or less morphed into Procol Harum later on, as you probably know. So.
That's true. I wanted to show you. So strange, the timing. What I picked up yesterday. This is what I picked up yesterday. You see that? Ooh, there we go.
Ah, Japanese, yes.
Yeah. Went to a local store and I said, okay.
When we were in Legend, we were thinking of doing an album which we were going to call Live at Watford Gap, because there was a services there, truckers stop kind of thing, where people could go to get very greasy food, and that kind of idea of having a plate full of food and then it's all gone. Mickey obviously used that for a later album, but Japanese is a great album. Part of it's produced by Gary Brooker, and the other part's by Dave Edmonds. So.
Yes, that's true. I saw that on the back. I'm looking forward to listening to it. I haven't heard it yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
It's very good. He's a good guy, Juppy. He can be a bit difficult. Well, I'm not the first person to say that, and he knows he can be difficult, but he's very talented.
Very talented. Well, there was a whole slew of early bands that you were a part of. Did you want to mention some of the highlights?
Well, I actually was in a band called Red Green and his Blues Combo, and one of the guitarists in that band was Mo Whittam. Bob Clouter was in the band. And at the time, the Orioles were going through some sea changes for personnel. We kind of backed ourselves into the Orioles. And so we had a 5-piece version of the Orioles with Mickey Jupp on piano. He didn't play guitar in the Orioles at the time. I played bass. We had Barry Scandling on rhythm and Mo on lead guitar. And so that was the first time I really played rock and roll and blues with a proper band live. We used to play a lot in a local pub, and that was the beginning of my musical relationship with Mick. But I've been in 5 bands with Mick as well, Mickey Jupp, or Juppy as he likes to be called.
Yes, you have. Yeah, you were, like you mentioned, the Orioles, and then you found yourself reuniting again with Mo and John in Legend. But let's not jump ahead. Talk briefly about, let's talk about the formation of the Fingers. Who named the band? Who actually named the band?
Well, they were named the Fingers before I joined, but they had a manager who called himself John Thumb, so they carried the joke on. But when what actually happened was I left the Orioles. And I went up north to do some cabaret stuff with Jess Conrad, which is a whole different story. The band was good because Rhett Stoller was the guitarist. They had a guy called Bernie Martin playing drums. They'd both been in an early 60s band called Russ Sainty and the New Notes. Bob and I knew each other from Southend. We used to do a short set before Jess Conrad came on, and Bob used to sing. He's a very, very good singer, Bob. He doesn't play anymore, but he's an excellent singer. I remember he used to sing It's Not Unusual, and Jess Conrad asked him to stop singing it. Jess was a very handsome man, a very good showman, but I think Bob was a better singer.
He does, yeah, Bob does have some good pipes. He does have some good, definitely. From what I've heard, real good vocalist. So what were the members that were in when you joined the band? What influences did they bring to the band? What were they into?
Well, when I joined them, they were a pretty standard 4-piece lineup. 2 guitars, bass, and drums. There was a guy called Rick Mills who was playing lead, singing lead. A good drummer called Jim Spicer. The guy that was leaving, Mike Chu, was joining the army.
Okay.
And also there's a guy called Dave Grout playing rhythm. But they were doing things like the Kinks, the Beatles, a little bit of Cliff and the Shadows stuff, a little bit of rock and roll. They were quite a tight band, good band to play with. And they were doing a fair amount of work, mainly in the kind of bottom half of the UK, so we didn't travel that far at that time, although the Fingers did a lot more later on when we had several changes in personnel. But we were actually asked to join up with a pianist called Alan Beecham, a guy in a local pub that had music every night, which of course we used to have music every night in the 60s and 70s, no longer, unfortunately. And he'd formed this band called the Gemini 6 or something like that. He bought them a load of gear. It didn't work out. They needed another band. And the guy that was managing us at the time said, well, we'll put the Fingers in there. He said, yeah, but I like Alan, so do you mind adding a keyboard player? And of course, at that time, it was really just organ. As a Fox Continental, pretty awful things, really. Nowhere near the league of a Hammond sound or anything like that. But Alan's a good musician. He's a funny bloke, nice guy to work with, and so we enjoyed that. Jim Spicer left after a while, and Bob Clouter came in. I've been working with Bob in the Orioles and also in the Phantoms. And a little bit later, we persuaded Rick, who was a good guitarist, but we could see he had potential to be a really good showman,
Right.
to let us bring in Mo Whittam from the Orioles. And that gave us a whole different sound, really. And of course, Alan got one of these Hohner Pianettes, sort of the first electric piano. Didn't sound anything like a piano, but it was quite effective at the time. And we had another guy called Peter Eden, who did a lot of record producing in the 60s, who said to us, well, look, you're doing loads of soul stuff, Sam and Dave and things like that. You're doing what everybody else is doing. How about looking at Greenwich Village kind of stuff? So he introduced us to the Young Rascals and the Loving Spoonful, Timmy Hardin, various other different influences. And so we did change our sound a bit. He also introduced us to wearing hats and braces on stage with granny shirts, with granddad shirts. I think we're probably one of the first bands to wear granddad shirts. And we actually styled ourselves as the first UK psychedelic band,
Right.
which is not all true.
Not all true. Let me stop you. Let me ask you about that. His idea. He had some gimmicks. Peter Eden definitely did have some gimmicks. What did you originally think of that image with the hillbilly hats and the vest? What did you think?
Well, we hated it, really, but we soon found that people remembered us because we were wearing something that's totally different to everybody else.
Right.
That was rather good. In fact, one band who quite liked us, we found out that they'd started to wear hats and braces and the collarless shirts. So we told them off. To be fair to them, they said, okay, we won't do it anymore. But we had, we also made our own special lighting out of old record players with round bits of wood with a bit cut out and a light in it, so that as it went round and round, it gave us a strobe effect. Right. And I remember that they actually cannibalized 2 Vox AC30 cabinets with lights and funny colours. It's a shame, really, because the AC30s are probably worth a lot of money now if we hadn't done that.
So you maybe came out with the first strobe light, your band.
It might have been that, but we also made up things as well, because we said, for example, that we'd got a pet monkey called Freak Out. And we told various people that we spoke to in the press that it made psychotic smells.
So what is a psychotic smell? What is a psychotic smell? What
It's
is
like,
it?
I don't know. It's just something we made up. And also, we did actually say that we used to stab a teddy bear to death that had tomato ketchup inside. So we weren't really taking everything that seriously. But I was asked to do an interview about psychedelic music in the Melody Maker.
Mhm.
And this is Peter Eden's idea. And I said, well, who else is going to be interviewed? And he said, oh, Graham Nash and a few other people. And I thought, well, you know, who am I to be on the same page as Graham Nash? And he said, well, this guy that's going to interview you likes Charlie Mingus. He said, so if you make up something about Charlie Mingus, he will put all that in the Melody Maker. So he said to me, well, what does your psychedelic music sound like? And I said, well, it's a little bit like Charlie Mingus with a fuzz box and a fuzz lead. Oh, brilliant! That's fabulous. That sounds great, man. So there you go. I have to tell you actually that one time when I was working, I had one of these secret Santa things where people get a present at my Christmas, and they gave me a bottle of bullshit pills. So I've obviously not changed very much.
How funny.
But we did have some great times with the Fingers, and we were very lucky because there was one particular place in South End, the Cliffs Pavilions, quite a big concert hall, and they used to run concerts every Saturday. We were there nearly every Saturday for about 3 years, something like that, and they had lots of people like David Essex and the Cougars and Guy Darrell, lots of other very well known. The Move, for example. We loved The Move, you know, fabulous band. We went to see them lots.
You mentioned David Essex. Talk about the time that you almost backed David Essex.
Yes, we were asked on some of our records, the B-sides were actually published by Radio Caroline's company. And the drill was that if you let them publish it, then you automatically got into the Radio Caroline charts.
Okay, that's how it works.
Because they wanted to get the money for their records. But they were organising this tour, a package tour, and they had various bands in a pub somewhere in South London that they were auditioning. One of them was a band called The Gods, and the guitarist was but you know, I've gone a bit blank. Mick, very well known guitarist in the Rolling Stones.
Mick Taylor.
That's the one. That's the one. Yeah. We both had to think about that, didn't we? Mick Taylor. He was great. But David Essex and his band at the time, Mood Indigo, were being auditioned, and you know, they wanted David Essex to do it because he's a good showman. He was handsome. All the girls liked him, and they said, "Would we back David Essex?" And we said, well, we don't really want to do that, because we want to plough our own furrow. We want to try and do something with the band. And in fact, I don't think the package tour ever happened in the end. So we turned that down. But you know, we've been pretty good at turning down good things in the past, because we had Mickey Most come to see us.
Right.
He was recommended to come to see us by the Animals agent, and he said, "I'm going to come and see you." He phoned me up. He said, "I'm going to come and see you." And he came to see us in a pub in the Edgware Road, and he stood leaning against a pillar for about 10 or 12 songs, and then went. Didn't talk to us. So I thought, obviously didn't like us. And he phoned me up the next day, and he said, right, he said, "I'd like to lead you the right way." He said, "but the way I work is that I'd manage you, I'd be your agent, I'd help you to get things published, I'd tell you what to play, I'd tell you what to wear, I'd tell you where to play." He said, "that might sound a bit strict." He said, "but I will make you stars." And to be fair to him, he'd done that with various other people, as we know.
Right.
rather naively, I said to him, "Oh, but we've got a manager in Southend already, and he's a friend of ours, you know." Now, this was obviously a very stupid decision, because we should have actually said to our friend Dick,
Mhm.
"Sorry, mate, we've got this good offer. Will you just let us go, or will you let Mickey Mouse give you some money to
Mhm.
let us go?"
Mm.
So that was one of the first things that we turned down. We also turned down Jonathan King, which in
Jonathan-
hindsight was a good thing,
Right.
because he's
Right.
obviously fallen from grace, isn't he?
Right. Right.
Mm.
Yeah, I was going to mention that about Jonathan King as well. But yeah, but you have to compliment you on your loyalty to your manager, though, because that, like you said, that came up a couple of times. And I don't know, that may be a rare thing in music. I don't know, in the music industry, I'm not sure, but I have to commend you on that anyway. Talk
Thank
talk a
you.
little bit talk a little bit about Rick and his showmanship. Uh, what would he do? What would he do?
Well,
Give me an
he was the
example of his.
first person that I saw swinging a mic around and brandishing a mic stand up in the air and everything, like lots of singers did later on. He was the first person I saw running around the stage. He was the first person I saw pointing at people in the audience, pulling faces. He was, I would say, he's probably the best showman I've ever worked with, and lots of people remember him. He's very talented. He's still singing and playing. He lives in Harrogate, and he goes out as a solo singer. He said that he misses being in a band, though, because you don't have that camaraderie when you're just by
Oh,
yourself. But he's a very good singer, very talented, and we did 3 singles with the Fingers, and the 4th one we'd run out of time at the Abbey Road studios. We were signed to EMI. So Peter Eden put Rick in as Daddy Lindbergh, and
right.
we were the session musicians. So it was really the Fingers on that. And we recorded a Jeff Stevens song called Shirl, which was also done by the New Vaudeville Band. Previously, we'd done another one by him called All Kinds of People. They were very commercial, not really the kind of stuff we were looking to play. But we had about a quarter of an hour left at the end of the recording session for Shirl. And we just wrote a piece of rubbish, really, called Wade in the Shade, which was mainly drums and bass and a little bit of shouting going on. And strangely enough, people have flipped that and they sell that on eBay for up to 350 quid. So I wish I'd got a whole stack for them in the garage, but I haven't. And as you say, some of the Fingers records have turned up on compilations. A couple of the things, like Circus with a Female Clown,
Right.
I occasionally get a royalty check. Last royalty statement I got for that, because I was a co-writer, it had had sales in Israel and Scandinavia and the UK and the States, and it was 65 pence. And they have this rule, Dick James Music or whatever they're called now, that they don't pay you out until you're owed £25. So I'm not earning any money from that anymore.
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned Circus with a Female Clown. That was the very first Finger song that I ever heard.
And it didn't put you off.
No. I like it. And it was from a various artist compilation called the Circus Days. So I wonder if there's a connection there. Circus, Female Clown, Circus Days. I wonder if that's why that song got put on there. I don't know.
Possibly, I don't know, but that was something that was a bit more like we were playing on stage, and also we did some things. There was one called "I Hear the Sun,"
right?
Which I didn't write it. I started to write it, and Ricky Mills and Pete Eden finished it off with me. We didn't write it as a psychedelic song. We really wrote it as aping the move, because it's a nice rocky song. And that comes out. That's come out on various things as well. And we also did a television show in Frankfurt Town Hall in 1967. It was a program called Beat, 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 quite a well-known program. The two tracks that we did on that surfaced on a French CD a little bit later, and a few years back, I was able to get a DVD of us there. We were all about 19 or 20 then. And on the show, they had the Equals, who actually didn't even have a bass player at the time. They had the Tremolos, who couldn't be bothered to get their guitars out of the cases and borrowed ours. But they were very good. They had Sue and Sonny there, who you probably remember, good singers. Tiffany. They had Don Storer and Cherry Wayner, more from the 50s, really. I was reminded by Mo, not so long ago, that they sacked the audience because they weren't enthusiastic enough.
Really?
They turfed them all out, went and got another audience and said, you can only come to the show if you're really enthusiastic.
Really?
But that video is on YouTube now. And a little while ago, the people that actually own it now said, you can't use this because it's copyrighted. And I said, well, come on, it's 1967. I was actually in the band that was playing. It's not really going to affect your royalties very much.
No.
And to be fair to them, they came back and said, oh, go on then, you can use it.
Did you enjoy that experience on Beat, Beat, Beat? Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, we did. Yes, we did. It was good fun. Yeah. And that was the first time I was on telly. The only other time I've been on telly was once with Legend, which we did a program called Disco 2. Yeah. We did a couple of numbers. We were playing in Harlow that night, and it was before video cassette recorders. So we wanted to see ourselves, and somehow we managed to get back in time, go around a couple of girls' houses to see us on television. So, of course, the thing is, when you see yourself on television, you think, I shouldn't be standing like that, or why have I got a funny face?
Yeah, you're very critical of yourself, aren't you? Yeah.
I think it goes with the territory of lots of musicians. I mean, this band I'm in at the moment, the work ethic is fantastic. When we want to learn a number, we exchange song sheets with the chords, and people sometimes change chords a bit. We work out all the harmonies, we all learn it. We get to rehearsal and we don't learn things at rehearsal. We learn them at home and then go and rehearse them at the rehearsal. Right. But I think I've always been a little bit like that. In fact, when I was in Legend, they used to call me Rabbit, based on the Winnie the Pooh thing, because Rabbit in the Winnie the Pooh stories always like to be organised, but that's just the way I am. I can't do it any other way.
It's your nature. Well, let's backtrack just a little bit. I wanted to talk about the finger single. I'll Take You Where the Music's Playing. That's a nice Drifters cover.
I love the Drifters. We'd been doing it on stage. And Pete said, yeah, let's do that. And then he dropped a bit of a bombshell. He said that at that time, EMI weren't letting a lot of their stars play on their own records because they only had about 3 hours to get in there, get a sound, layer things, because people used to record them in for example, click track, then bass and drums, then rhythm, then lead. Awful way of recording. And then, of course, they had to break all the gear down and get out after having put the harmonies on and everything. And they didn't trust 19-year-olds or 18-year-olds, whatever we were then, to do that. And they'd lined up some really good people to play on it. They had Clem Catini on drums, who's been on loads of hit songs, and he was in Tornadoes, you obviously know. Yeah. They had Alan Parsons from Blue Mink, who again is a renowned session player. They had Joe Moretti, who's been on lots of things, including Shaking All Over. And they had Nikki Hopkins, who famously played with the Rolling Stones. Yeah. So it was a bit of a super group there, really, just spoilt by our vocals.
I wanted to mention specifically Nikki Hopkins. He's been one of my favorites for years, and
great pianist.
Sad to hear of his passing many years ago, but great musician. So many different bands hired him, used him. I don't know if you're familiar with Quicksilver Messenger Service instrumental Spindrifter.
Yes.
Okay. Nice. He makes that song. Of course, it's just him playing the piano, basically, but great song. And the other one is Jenny by Sweet Thursday. Are you familiar with the band Sweet Thursday?
No, I haven't heard that.
You should check them out. I think they had one album. It was a trio made of Nikki, John Mark of Mark Almond.
Right.
Remember Mark Almond, John Mark, and Alan Davies, who worked with Cat Stevens. But it was a trio, really good stuff. But he plays the piano on that. It's kind of a Western, country and Western, like a Floyd Kramer, tickling the ivories. Yeah. That kind
on the rebound.
Country and Western kind of a sound to it. But it's another one to check out. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out about Nikki. What were your memories of recording at Abbey Road?
Well, one outstanding memory was that I think it was Studio 1 we're in, and there was a big pile of guitars in cases in the corner of this place, or on the side of this place, and they belonged to the Beatles. So of course we opened them up and had a look at the guitars and had a little play, and we were quite interested to note that there was some left-hand lead guitars amongst those. So so perhaps Paul McCartney has played lead on more things than we realised.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Luckily we didn't get caught doing it, but it was good fun. Yeah. But of course, EMI in those days, the engineers used to wear white coats, and they were terribly sort of like laboratory assistants, if you like. And it was a long time before we got people like Tony Visconti doing things, and a good few years. And we did enjoy doing that. But of course, a lot of these studios were used for symphony orchestras, concert orchestras, and things like that before you got sort of young louts like the Fingers going in there. But we also did a little bit of session work with various strange people. And Bob Clouter and I were on a record called I'll Be Your Baby Tonight, the Bob Dylan one, by a jug band called Vernon Haddock's Jubilee Lovelies.
I was going to ask you about that.
Which was another one of Pete Eden's entourage. I mean, Pete's produced all sorts of people, and in fact, him and Jeff Stevens used to manage Donovan, in his early days. So,
well, it's interesting that you did the sessions, the Jeff Stevens songs, because you saw in my interviews where I talked with John Carter earlier this summer, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Of course, they wrote together.
Yeah. And John Carter, he was with Carter Lewis and the Southerners, wasn't he? In the Ivy League. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Great vocals. Good band, Carter Lewis and the Southerners. Yeah.
Oh yes, he was. Yeah. Well, let me ask you then. After the not long after Beat Beat Beat, you and Bob left the band, correct?
Yes. Okay. At the time, we thought we were probably going to give up playing, get married. Neither of those things happened. I gave out playing for about 18 months, and then I started playing in a band called Match. Bob started playing again, and this band Match, we had a guy called Doug Sheldrake in the band who was playing virginal, rather strange thing to cart around with you. A very good guitarist. He's a good keyboard player. And in fact, he was the first guitarist of the Orioles before Mo joined with us. And David Knights from Procol Harum had left Procol Harum, and he was getting into management. He was beginning to manage Juppy. He wanted to record a single. Juppy asked me if I'd join this new version of Legend because he has an acoustic version prior to that with some of our friends in. Chris East, who's a good friend. And at the time, I said, no, I don't want to do that because I'm working with this band Match. I think it'd be okay. And so they recorded a song called Georgia George with a thing called July on the back. And it had Mo on lead guitar, Matthew Fisher was playing bass, Barry Wilson was playing drums, and I think it was produced by Robin Trower. I seem to remember that. Anyway, it was a good thing. But later, I was persuaded to join Legend, and at that time we had a guy called Bill Fifield playing drums with us. There was Mo, Mick, who by this time was also playing guitar on stage sometimes, and myself. And we started off more or less being the Orioles again, doing that kind of thing, sort of rock and roll, R&B and things like that. Mick by this time was writing some good songs, but wasn't really very keen on doing them on stage. And we always had a problem trying to get him to do enough of his material, which is a great shame because he's written, I don't know, 400 or 500 songs. He's been recorded by loads of people like the Searchers, the Swinging Blue Jeans, Elkie Brooks, the Judds, Curls of Flies, Ricky Nelson, you name it. You've probably seen the list. And
Yeah,
he always maintains he's never made any money writing songs, but
really.
who knows?
Really? Well, he was one of Mickey was one of the originators, really, of that pub rock sound, wasn't he?
That's what they say. They say that Legend was one of the first pub rock bands, and they actually say that we were kind of a little bit before pub rock.
Right.
I know we influenced Dr. Feelgood because they used to come see us.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, when Mo, at one stage, when Wilco Johnson left Dr. Feelgood, Mo was asked if he wanted to join Dr. Feelgood, but that didn't happen for some reason or other. But I did an album a little bit later with John Potter, who played with piano with Dr. Feelgood for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that Wilco used to like the Red Boot album. He always used to say that Dr. Feelgood have got to sound more like the Orioles.
Yeah.
But I guess, Wilco's done really well for himself, and obviously he had that terrible medical problem. But he's still touring. He's doing things. He's very popular in Japan, which is great. Mick's also been very good at turning down good opportunities in his life. But he famously said recently they've started to re-release some of his home done recordings.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "I don't really want my career revived," which is a strange thing, but there you go. He's obviously happy where he lives. He lives up in Cumbria, beautiful place. He's always been a bit of a square peg in a round hole, but very talented. Great singer, good guitarist. He had an unusual style, and him and Mo used to cross riff very roughly, very robustly, should I say? And it really worked really well. And Bill Fifield left us to do. He was doing some sessions for Tony Visconti because he'd produced the Red Boot album for us, and he did some sessions with Ralph McTell and various other people. And one of the sessions was Hot Love for T-Rex.
Right.
And I think I mentioned to you that. The Bill left us to join T-Rex. Of course, it's better on his CV, really.
Right.
And Mark Bolan said to him, "We can't call you Fifield. It's not a rock and roll name." He said, "I'm going to call you Bill Legend." And Bill was in T-Rex for 3.5 years, so he toured all over the world. He had lots of hits. I still see him on Top of the Pops recordings and old recordings. So it's but he's living in California now.
Okay, is that right? Okay. Well, Bob replaced Bill, your old friend Bob.
Yes, he did. Yeah, that was very good. We actually sort of persuaded Bob to do it. I don't think it was his first wife was not very keen on him doing it. I don't think, but to give him his credit, he decided he wanted to do it. Came in, and obviously it was very nice working with him again. He's a great drummer. I've been in lots of bands with him. And even when we left Legend, we ended up in a band called Salty Dog together. We pinched the name from a Procol Harum song.
Right.
But that was a good band. And we did maybe 3 years, 5 or 6 nights a week. So it was a popular band as well.
Really? Regarding the album, the second Legend, and of course, it's been known by Red Boot because there's a big red boot on it.
Yes.
I have a few comments. I do like the backing harmonies, vocals, which I'm sure you had something to do with on most of the tracks. And like I said before, I hear the genesis of the pub rock sound coming out. I
Excellent.
think the album starts out really strong. The first two tracks are actually my favorite, Cross Country and Checkbook. They're both really great rockin' tunes, and they're very memorable too.
I like that album, and I think I've listened to it fairly recently, and obviously it was retro even then because, as you said, it was based on the Coasters and various people like that, a bit doo-woppy with some good harmonies and things like that. It was a nice, strong album. Juppy and Tony Visconti didn't really have the same ideas about how it should sound. Juppy likes everything to be very dry, no echo, no effects, no reverb. Tony Visconti said to him, "That will sound lifeless. You shouldn't do that." And it was recorded like that. But Tony, of course, Tony added things later. I'm not certain what Juppy thinks of it now, but I'm still quite proud of that album. I like that album.
Right.
And we didn't really like the sleeve,
Right.
but it's proved to be very good because people remember it.
They remember it.
And of course, it wasn't called the Red Book album; it was just called Legend. But
Legend.
it's always called the Red Book album on the internet. Always.
Did you play any live gigs?
Oh yes, yeah, we did. Yes,
Sorry.
we did lots of work. We used to do lots of radio shows. Radio 2, so we did John Peel's show and Emperor Roscoe and various people like that. And we used to work in the Paris studios in London quite a lot, and it's Paris Theatre. And at one time, I wrote to the BBC and said, "Could I have copies of these recordings from these dates?" And they said, "Well, you'll have to pay for it." So I said, "How much?" And it wasn't very much. So I said, "Yes." And they said, "You'll have to sign something to say it's only for personal usage." So I said, "Yes." 2 weeks later, they came back and said, "Oh, sorry, about 2 months ago, a whole bunch of stuff has been destroyed."
Really?
Yeah. Well, of course, now storage space is so easy. They wouldn't destroy anything. This is why you get all these outtakes and different versions coming out, things like that. But we also used to do lots of university gigs, rag balls and things like that. So we played on the same bill as people like Dudley Moore and Monty Python's Flying Circus, for example. So that was great fun. And some of these rag balls, they must have spent a fortune on some of these acts. And there were a lot of other rock and roll people going around, like the Wild Angels. They were a good band. Good singer, good showman, Mal Gray. We saw the Idle Race, which of course was Jeff Lynne's band. I think Roy Wood was in the band as well at the time. Love Roy Wood. I think he's very clever. And of course, Jeff Lynne has recently re-recorded all the ELO stuff digitally because he wasn't happy with the original analog recordings. So that's how much of a perfectionist he is. But we also ran into Shaking Stevens a lot with his band The Sunsets. He was a good singer, but then all of a sudden we saw him on the telly and we thought, this guy's been taught how to move and showed gave him some hints on showmanship. Of course, he's great at that, and in fact, he's recently been doing a tour with a friend of mine, a bloke called Liam Grundy, who's got a terrific band. If you like good rock and roll and a little bit of country, worth looking him out. And he's got a wonderful guitarist, a Danish guy called Preben Ravnsborg.
Really?
So have a listen to Liam Grundy. He's really good.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked you about if you played any live gigs, another song from that album, the Red Boot, Nothing Wrong With Me. Did you play that live? Because
I don't think we ever did, to be honest with you.
Because that sounds like a song is a no-brainer for playing live. It would get the audience really involved. It was, listen to that song again. It seems like it would be like a, hoot and call, they would sing and get the audience really involved in it. It just seems like that kind of.
Of course, that's the one that we actually, at the end of putting some harmonies on, we started clapping and just left it on. But and of course, the other one that we had a bit of fun with was My Typewriter. Juffy doing the Boris Karloff stuff in the history of my castle.
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed listening to that. Somebody in Love. Let me ask you this: Somebody in Love, is that Mickey's take on Fats Domino?
Oh yes, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too.
And with those kind of harmonies as well, it's very 50s influenced, definitely. You know. And one of Mickey's favourite records of all time is Poison Ivy. Loves the Coasters, you know. So he likes I'm a Hog for You. So so he was obviously very influenced by those kind of people, oldies R&B kind of stuff, you know.
It comes out in the music. And the last song, Hole in My Pocket, that's a real good boogie number. Do you recall that one, Hole in My Pocket?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That really gets you going too. Yeah. Well, it was
I actually saw a video of a guy called Heading something, whose name I can't remember. He's a Danish singer, good singer, and he was singing Checkbook somewhere in Scandinavia, and he had the Jordanaires singing the harmonies that Mo and Mick and I worked out.
Really?
So how about that?
Is that right? Wow, that's something else.
Yeah, I was tickled pink by that. Yeah. I must admit though, actually, that a friend of mine, Nick Ryan, who's sadly no longer with us, he's a singer, and he was a singer, bass player, very funny guy. One band he was in, he had all the wives up on stage once. He said, they're going to sing. He said, you've heard of the Jordanaires, these are the pubic hairs.
That's great. That's funny. I like that. I like those kind of anecdotes like that. Well, let's talk of you've already mentioned a couple, the Idle Race, you know, some of the bands that you supported. Talk about Manfred Mann. On what occasion was that?
That was in the Supreme Ballroom in Ramsgate. And Jack Bruce was playing in the band at the time. You know, he was a session musician as well, great bass player, obviously. And I was talking to him, and I said to him, "Do you enjoy playing with Manfred Mann?" And he said, "No, not really. It's a job. You know, I'm a session musician." He said, "But I'm forming a band at the moment." And he said that it's going to be great. So I said, "Well, who's in it?" "I can't tell you," he said, "because of contractual reasons." He says, "Got a fantastic guitarist, blues guitarist, and a really good drummer." And of course, it was Cream he was talking about. So, so I knew a little bit about Cream, but not who was in the band.
Wow.
And they did all right for themselves, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they did.
Just about.
I think they.
And the other time we played at the Supreme Ballroom, we'd done a record called "I Go to Sleep," and it was written by Ray Davies. So we were supporting the Kinks,
right?
And we were doing a sound check, and Ray Davies came up to me, and he kind of pointed at me. And he looked a bit unsteady on his feet. I don't know what he was influenced by. He said, "You did I Go to Sleep." He said, "Nice." That's all he said to us, but at least he said it was nice. He could have come up and said, "I didn't like it."
Wow. Yeah, the Kinks. Yeah. Did you get to interact any with Ray or Dave or?
No. Well, to be honest, even when we played with a whole host of 60s stars at the Cliffs, and also with Legend, but a lot of the time, of course, they're on stage or you're in another dressing room, so we didn't get to meet them as much as I would have liked, actually. But I still think it was a privilege to play with all those people. You know, there's a whole long list of really good, well-known people that although we did actually back Billy Fury.
Yeah,
Legend.
That was the next one I was going to ask you. Billy Fury, yeah.
We played at the Country Club in Hampstead, and we did our own set, and then we backed Billy Fury. We'd actually had a rehearsal in a room above a pub somewhere in London, and he bought us all Cokes. I don't know who he might have been teetotal, I don't know, but exceptionally nice guy, a real gentleman, and a really, really good bloke. And obviously, as you know, good songwriter. He wrote good songs. He was a good showman, handsome guy, I have to say. Died very young, 43, I think. And I enjoyed doing all those things like Halfway to Paradise and all the other hits of his. Juppy wasn't interested at all. In fact, he was quite rude to him, really, by tinkering around and playing Rock Island Line in between Billy Fury's numbers.
Right.
In spite of that, we were asked if we wanted to do a rock and roll tour with people like Marty Wilde and Joe Brown and Roy Young and people like that. And that didn't happen. But we did do a couple of rock and roll festivals at the Chalk Farm Roundhouse. And they had Bert Whedon there, they had Roy Young, they had Emperor Roscoe, who was the MC. They had the Wild Angels, and that was good fun. Screaming Lord Sutch, standing on top of a grand piano, not a good idea, but I don't think you could really control Screaming Lord Sutch. And Roy Young, he was in a band with brass and sang some fabulous Little Richard style rock and roll. Good pianist, and in fact later on, not that long ago, he wanted to record a double album of Juppy songs. And he'd got two people lined up to play on it, who were Albert Lee and Dave Edmonds. So, good start, very good start. And he actually asked if he could come have a chat with Juppy, but for some reason or other, Nick didn't really want him to do that. I don't quite understand that. Maybe Mick can understand it, but I would have thought that if a double album with Roy Young on it and Albert Lee and Dave Edmonds was released, it would at least inject some money into Juppy's wallet, which is not a bad idea. But there you go. Mick has always ploughed his own furrow. He's always done exactly what he wants, and he's still doing that now. He doesn't really want to be part of the music scene anymore.
Right. He was never one to compromise. He was never one to compromise.
No. That's absolutely right, and I can say that without hesitation because he would admit that. A guy called Mike Wade, wrote a good biography of Juppy, which you might have read. It's called "Hole in My Pocket."
Okay.
And in that there are lots of missed opportunities because Mick just wasn't interested, really. And I can remember talking to my parents when he moved up to Cumbria, and them saying, my mum saying, "Well, why does he want to do that?" And Dad said, "Well, he just wants to do that. And if he wants to do that, and if he wants to play not so much, or if he wants to just do what he wants and play where he wants, with whom he wants, then that's up to him." But unfortunately, it's meant that somebody who could have been a very big star hasn't taken advantage of those opportunities.
Right.
So I think he is such a talent,
right.
that it's been a bit wasted, really.
Yeah, I can't get into his head, but I think probably a lot of that was losing control. He didn't want to lose control, and
I think that's probably right. Yeah, but Mo still plays with him a couple of. I think it's once or twice a year. Mo lives about 55 miles away from Juppy, and they play in a local pub, and they get people coming from all over the place, from Scandinavia and various different places. Some guys came from Australia to see him in a local pub in Boot in Eskdale. So he's still got followers, and Repertoire put out the Moonshine and Red Boot albums every now and then in different formats. Last one was heavy duty vinyl, and they put out a very good box set of Juppy things, and it had about 14 legend things on there that I was on, so that was quite nice.
The Cherry Red is really good.
Yeah, Cherry Red, and Cherry Red have also bought the Pete Eden productions as well. So they put out some Fingers stuff, including one thing that we did with the very first lineup that I joined from 1966. So we never thought we'd see the light of day. And in fact, on eBay recently, there was a Trixon drum kit which had the Fingers on it, on the bass drum. and somebody contacted me and said, could this be Jim's drum kit? And Jim Spicer, the original drummer of the Fingers. I said, well, it could be. And I sent a picture of it to Jim, and he said, yep, that's mine.
That was
And
his.
they'd found it in a pigsty in Spain. It'd been stored in a pigsty, needed a lot of work to get it back to being playable. And apparently somebody bought it, moved to Spain, stopped playing, just dumped it in a shed or a pigsty, and so strange things happening.
I bet it smelled. I bet it smelled really good, right?
Yes, yes, that's right. Yes, that's right.
Well, jumping back to the artists, bands that you supported, a couple of comedy acts. Talk about Monty Python's Flying Circus.
Yeah, that was at a rag ball somewhere. And it was Michael Palin, Terry Jones, and John Cleese. Graham Chapman wasn't there, but they were very funny, and they did do the Dead Parrot sketch. So I don't think there are many people who could say they've been on the same bill as Monty Python's Flying Circus.
Right.
And they were very funny. And unfortunately, John Cleese has got a little bit jaded, shall we say. He seems a bit of a misery now, doesn't he? But
right. He moved to Nevis. I saw a YouTube video down in the Caribbean. He moved to the island of Nevis.
Oh, did he?
So yeah.
Because he said he was doing a tour recently to pay for a divorce, didn't he? I think. So,
I know Eric Idle lives in L.A. or California. I know he's relocated out there.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah. But that's very interesting. And then also the other comedy act, Dudley Moore. Talk about your.
Well, he wasn't doing comedy that night. He was playing jazz piano.
Oh, okay.
A very, very good pianist. Really, really. I can't remember the names of the other people in the band. There was a double bass player and a drummer. Really good. And Mo sat next to Susie Kendall, who the very beautiful, popular model at the time, who was married to Dudley Moore. And as we got up to walk out, Mo said to me, I'm not going to wash for a month. She was very beautiful. I have to admit that, yeah. She might still be beautiful, I don't know. But Dudley Moore, I mean, he was obviously a major talent. He was very funny, wasn't he? Very funny. And of course, the Derek and Clive stuff was a little bit blue, but extremely funny as well.
And he and Peter Cook were a very funny duo. Yes. Okay, talk about let me mention a few here that I'm very interested in. What about Davy Jones in the Lower Third? What was David Bowie like at that time?
We played with them. It was Legend, and it was at the Marquee, and there were some other bands on as well, and they were okay. Nothing wrong with the band, but he hadn't matured into that fantastic showman that he became. And obviously he's got an unusual voice as well, isn't he? And of course he was produced by Tony Visconti. We didn't actually ever meet David Bowie, although we did meet Mick Ronson, who came to one of our Legend recording sessions. I think Tony Visconti was playing with the Spiders from Mars at the time as well, but exceptionally nice guy. But I have to say that I can't remember anything they sang. They might say the same thing about Legend, but obviously Bowie he became a major talent, and he was one of those people who changed images lots of times. Became the Thin White Duke and various other things. And in fact, another person I know who is a friend of mine, Paul Shuttleworth, who was in the Curls of Flyers, he was the same. He used to change his image every now and then. So he went from being Arthur Daly, or no, it wasn't Arthur Daly. It was George Cole in St Trinian's, as a spiv, with a little tash. He went from being that to having a flying helmet on, things like that. He's an exceptionally good artist as well, and he designed the logo for to management, my current band.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
And we had one of the Curls of Flies in an early version of the band, a couple of early versions, Vic Collins, fabulous guitarist, really good pedal steel player, extremely nice bloke. And he and I also worked in a band called Run Shunt in Cunningham for a long time. So it's the music business is very incestuous. You know, everybody knows everybody that knows someone else. So.
Oh, speaking of, there's let me get that over. I have to go backwards from where I'm looking at. Yeah.
Oh yes, yes.
Yes. That's one.
There you go. Well, it's Vic on the right-hand side with the tash.
Yeah.
Nice guy, Vic. Vic is a nice guy. He's a little bit bonkers, actually, which I mean bonkers in a nice way. He used to come up to me. There was an advert on UK television called about John Collier, who was a tailor, and they used to go, John Collier, the window to watch. And he used to come up and say, Johnny Bobin, the window to watch. Really nice guy. He's playing in a band called Borderline Music Company.
Okay.
And they do Americana, you know, the sort of Texas rock kind of stuff. And they write good songs, very good band.
Really? Okay. I'll check that out too. You mentioned earlier Screaming Lord Sutch standing on the piano.
Yes.
At that time, Richie Blackmore was in the band too, right?
I think he was. And the other person that was in his band for a while was Matthew Fisher.
Yes. Okay.
Procol Harum. That was the Savages, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Screaming Lord Sutch and the Savages. But Matthew Fisher, we met him a few times because he did some string arrangements for Moonshine, the second Legend album that I was on, and we hadn't heard these arrangements at all. We left spaces, and Del Newman was the MD, who's worked with various people like Elton John and a lot of other well-known people. And they had 12 violinists from the LSO, London Symphony Orchestra. And we came to do this song, one of Juppy's songs, and there was a beautiful, really beautiful piece that he'd written in the middle, the solo, the strings interweaving between each other. And the engineer turned the mic off. He said, I'm going to get him to do it again. So I said, why? He said, because I want 24 violins on it. He said, but I'm not going to tell them there's nothing wrong with the first version. I just don't want to pay for them twice.
That's a good story there too. I don't want to pay twice. That's funny. Well, one more that I wanted to mention, the Zombies. You have to tell me about supporting. That is one of my all-time favorite groups, the Zombies. On what occasion?
They are just a terrific band. We supported them only once in the 60s, but I've actually seen them comparatively recently. And obviously the harmonies that they used to do,
right,
and the keyboard played by Rod Argent, you know, just terrific, really, really good sound. And some of their songs like She's Not There and Tell Her No and things like that, to my mind, are some of the best songs of the 60s. Those and things by the Harleys and the Move, people like that. And of course the Beatles, you know, obviously the Beatles, we still do Beatles songs into management. And they still go down well.
Yeah. Well, that's that Baroque sound that they had is very unique. And they have quite a few really strong songs, you know, especially from Odyssey and Oracle.
Oh yes,
you know, really classic. But they really should have been a lot bigger than they were.
Oh, I think so. I think so. When we saw them recently, there was a place in London, and they had Jim Rodford playing bass, who was in the Kinks for a long time, and his son was playing drums, I think, and they had a session guitarist, but they were really, really good. And I bought that album that came out at the time. I can't remember what it was called, but it's worth getting. It was only about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And no, they were a really good band. One of my favorites is definitely She's Not There.
Right. Yes. Definitely a great song. And the harmonies in that. uh, and just they just kind of put it all together. But yeah, Rod Argent went on, with Argent, to do some more hard rock kind of stuff. But it's great that they got back together too. So
Yeah, yeah.
they still sound as good. They still sound as good.
Oh yes, yeah. And of course, Russ Ballard was in Argent as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
And he used to play in the Roulettes with Adam Faith.
Hmm. Hmm.
And funny enough, when Bob and I and Alan left the Fingers, they got two guys in, Lloyd Courtney and Brian Gill, and they'd been playing in a band called the Impacts, also back in Adam Faith. So this is the same circular thing. And Lloyd went on to play with a band called Arrival. They had a couple of hits in the UK, and he was in the Barren Knights for a long time. And Brian is living in Thailand, I think. So, but because of Facebook, you can be in touch with loads of people, which is nice.
Yes, it is. It's really, yeah. I wanted to switch over now and talk about a couple of your books. Just
Okay.
briefly, I guess, if we can. I wanted to talk about Bark Staving Ronkers. Now, did you switch the letters around from Stark Raving Bonkers?
Yes. And in
Okay.
fact, I can remember how that came about. We've been doing some recording at Advision with Tony Visconti for the Red Boot album. And we were driving back because there's a bit of a fashion for recording at night at one time, you probably remember, which is probably a silly thing to do, but there you go, people like doing it. And we were driving back, and it was just before dawn, and the birds were beginning to sing. We'd been working all night. We'd actually been drinking Teachers and Coke because David Knights used to bring in some bottles and some Coke cans, and we'd drink a bit of the Coke and there'd be a bit more whiskey. And of course, towards the end of the evening, it was nearly all whiskey. But the birds were singing, and I remember saying to Mick, because we had a fashion for switching things around, those birds must be bark staving ronkers. So we thought that was funny. And in fact, another thing that we did, we kind of borrowed a stopwatch from Advision, and because we were just being silly, I said, I wonder how long it would take us to drive along for 10 seconds. So we said, it took 10 seconds. Those are the kind of things that are only funny when you're drunk, I think, really. But Bark Staving Ronkers, I thought that was a good name. And if it's just been Stark Raving Bonkers, people wouldn't have remembered it so much, I don't think.
Right. True.
And that was about starting to play when I was 12 to when I left Legend. So because we went to Italy, and we had a small hit there in Italy. It was a thing called Life that was number 12 in the charts over there. And this guy asked us to go over there, do some gigs, and we said, of course. And they said, we're going to put some expenses in a bank account for you. And that hadn't happened before we went. And they said, don't worry, it will all be sorted out when you get there. You'll have this money. It'll be no problem at all. And again, rather naively, we believed them and went. And of course, there wasn't any money. And in fact, in the end, there were no gigs. We only did about 3 or 4 gigs over there. And we had to, in the end, we had to borrow money from Philips in Milan. We went to Philips and we slept on Milan station because we had no money to get a hotel or anything. We'd run out of cash. And we went to see them, and they said, who are you? And we said, we're Legend. Oh, good, they say, you're in the charts. Have a cup of coffee and a biscuit. And they said, what can we do for you? And they said, well, can you get us some work? And they said, yes, definitely. Yeah, we'll get you some work. It will be 6 or 8 weeks from now because there's a tail there. There's a bit of a lead. And we said, well, we just can't do that really. We've got to get home. So they actually gave us advance on our royalties, and then we came home. But a friend of ours was one of our roadies, a guy called Roger Balcom, and there was another guy called Stuart Brooks, who was a bass player, who was in the Pretty Things later on. He actually ran into this guy who was supposed to be paying us this money, and he said, you owe Legend some money. And the man said, no, I don't. He said, yes, you do. He said, you've got them over there on the promise of expenses and gigs and money. He said, definitely owe them some money. He said, no, I don't. And the guy behind him got out a gun.
Wow.
So Roger very wisely said, okay, you don't owe Legend any money, and left the room. Poor Roger, he's no longer with us, unfortunately, but he used to run a club in Basildon called Asylum. And I found an old handbill for that the other day. It said, Legend, the boozer's benefit.
That's funny. Well, he wasn't involved with the mafia in any way, was he?
With the guy from Italy, I don't know. I hope not. But it was a shame, really. I don't really know what happened there. And when we got back, David Knights had been giving us a small amount of money as a wage all the time, and we were building up a debt. I can't remember how much it was. It seemed like a lot of money to us at the time. And Bob and I decided that that we wanted to leave and do something a bit more. In fact, that's when we formed Salty Dog. But Dave said, well, you could keep playing. And I said, well, we're thinking of getting jobs. And I said to him, we could go out for fairly decent money as Legend, even if we were playing. But they decided to get Phil Mitchell, who was a friend of ours, who's been with Dr. Feelgood for a very long time, good bass player, nice guy, and Barney James. I first saw Barney in a band called Forum at the end of Southend Pier with Bob Heath, that was in the band with Jess Conrad with me. And Barney was he was in Warhorse for quite a while.
Warhorse, yes.
Prog band with Vertigo. We were totally out of place on Vertigo. I don't, how can you have a rock and roll band on a progressive label? Strange thing, really. Yeah. But Barney and Mo had some fun playing with Legend. But I remember that on Barney's website, and again, Barney's not with us anymore, but Barney said that Mickey Jupp is the one true curmudgeon of rock and roll. And somebody said to me, why doesn't Juppy form a band with Van Morrison and the guy from the Smiths, Morrissey? He said, because they can all grumble together. And, and in fact, in his pub, they've got a sign up which says Grumpy Corner. So his legend is still continuing.
I think if he was with Morrissey in a band, they would never get anything done. Because they wouldn't agree they couldn't come to an agreement.
Well, you talked about people giving up control once, didn't you? And in our chat, I remember when ELO formed, and they said, we've got Jeff Lynne and Roy Wood leading the band, and I thought, it's going to be a good band, but it's never going to last because they both want to do things exactly their own way. And of course they did in the end, and they're both very successful anyway, but it would never last a long time.
Right. Well, that was so unique, introducing a cello into a rock band like that. I'm sure at the time people were telling them it's not going to work. There was a lot of people, naysayers. There were a lot of people saying this can't work, but
Jeff Lynne is such a clever man. I bought one of his recent CDs, played it. I thought, this is great. I wonder who's playing on it. And it's virtually all him.
Right.
I think the only other person on it is his wife, who did a bit of singing and tambourine, and everything else is Jeff. So he's just a really, really clever man.
Wow. And then what was now I can't think of it, the band that he was in, the super group with George
Traveling
Harrison.
Wilburys.
Yes, the Traveling Wilburys. Yeah. I just saw a little documentary and I couldn't remember the name of it. Yeah. But he was the real impetus behind that.
Yes, he was.
And
very clever man.
Yeah, I thought so too. Well, talk about maybe another story or two from your book.
Our first record was originally recorded by a band called Force 5. And we used to play at the same pub as them, a place called the Elms in near Southend, a place called Leon C. We did 3 nights a week and they did 4, and we used to go out on Saturdays and other nights to play different places. and they recorded "I Go to Sleep," the Ray Davies song, and it had strings and oboe and things on it. I thought they did a very good version of it. Polydor listened to it and they said, "We don't like the singing. We're not going to release that." We'd not had anything released by the Fingers, and our then manager said, "Would you like to put some vocals onto this?" And we said, "No, not really. You know, we want to record our own stuff." They persuaded us to do that. So we went into the studio, and the backing was all done. It wasn't us playing on that either. So we recorded the lead vocal and the harmonies on that, and we put on the back of that a thing called "O" that I wrote with Peter Eden and Ricky Mills, which was kind of a sub-Beatles thing, really, that kind of thing. So the first two records that we were on didn't really have much of us on it, apart from the B-sides. You know, I'm lucky I've made up for that on various other records since, which is nice. And as we said earlier on, you know, we really had a super group playing on that Drifter song. So, and to be honest, they were probably much better than us as seasoned musicians then. You know, so they were really top-notch session players.
Right. Well, can you think of any other story you might want to mention from the book that was
Well, it's a bit difficult. There's so many things there, you know. But I remember that we used to play. There was normally 3 bands at the Cliffs Pavilion, and they had a headline band, like the Move, for example. We were in the middle slot, and there was another band that used to play the other slot called Sounds Around. They were good guys, nice people. My friend Nick Ryan, that I mentioned earlier, was the bass player for them. And later on, he did a lot of advertising jingles, and he did voiceovers. He had one of these deep brown voices. He used to do L'Oreal Rouge Sublime, and he wrote the lyrics to Just One Cornetto. You know, the ice cream advert.
Yeah.
And I said to him, "Did you make any money out of that?" And he said, "No, because I was working for an advertising agency. I was just on a salary." And he also had various things on the telly adverts. There was one for frozen peas. He was singing on that, and it was "Keep a Knocking," that old Little Richard thing. You know, you keep in, but you can't keep a knocking, but you can't come in. Right. And the thing was that if these peas were too big, they weren't allowed to go into the frozen peas because they weren't tender enough. And he also wrote, there was a cooking fat thing called Cookeen in the UK, and he wrote a thing which went, "Give him a lift with Cookeen," but again, no money. You know, so I know lots of people have done things but not made money.
Right. So,
but we were very, very lucky in playing with lots of people. We didn't get the social interaction that I would have liked, really. But I still feel privileged to have been on the same stage with all those guys. You know, so it's a good thing.
Right. Well, do you recall any incidents or situations with audience that got out of control or anything like that?
No, I haven't.
No?
I do remember actually that we supported Long John Baldry one night, and their PA packed up, so they borrowed ours, and they had a young fat pianist playing with them, which was Reg Dwight, who obviously became Elton John. Yeah. And they also had another guy with spiky hair with them, which was Rod Stewart.
Oh, right.
Yes. Right. So, and also there was a guy called Bernie Flint, who used to be fairly well known in the UK. He came onto the stage at the Cliffs Pavilion, and he was sound checking with his band, and he wasn't happy with the band, and he sacked the band. And we said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And he said, "Well, would you back me?" So we said, "Well, do the best we can, because he didn't have any charts. None of us could read music anyway. We didn't have time to learn anything. So somehow we managed to cobble something together and play with him. But so some strange things do happen along the way, you know. And also I remember one time we were playing in another band. We were backing a guy called Mike Reed, who was a stand-up comedian, and he ended up being in a soap opera in the UK called EastEnders.
Okay.
It's quite well known.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually said to us, can you guys play me on and off? So we said, yeah, of course. What would you like? He said, oh, I don't know. He said, you know what you're doing. Just do something swing stuff. Play me on, play me off, on and off. And he said, can you do Bye Bye Blackbird? So we said, yes. He said, what key do you want to sing it in? He said, I don't know. He said, I'll sing it. You tell me what key I'm in. So we did. And then he said, there's just one more thing I must tell you. He said, I will be taking the piss out of the band. So he said, well, look, you know, we back lots of comedians. We understand that. And one comedian that we worked with, do you know Freddie Starr?
I've heard his name before. I've heard
Yes,
that name.
he's no longer with us. He was very, very funny.
Mm-hmm.
There's an extremely funny video that he did where he's taking the mickey out of tapes, slowing down and speeding up. It's on YouTube, well worth seeing. Very funny, but he's just borderline, quite almost around the twist. Okay. He's got these sparkly eyes, and you think, is he going to attack somebody any minute? And we were playing at a gig that Bill Fifield got us. And he said to Mo, is that a good guitar? And Mo said, yes. He said, can I have a go on it? And Mo handed him a Fender Strat, and he dropped it on the floor deliberately.
Oh, wow.
So you imagine Mo wasn't very pleased with that, you know.
No.
But I must say, we've met a lot of nice people as well. And he wasn't a nice person. But there you go. But I remember when I was playing with Jess Conrad, we used to do an Anthony Newley song called Do You Mind? It starts off with bass and then the vocals come in.
Yes, I know the song.
And Jess Conrad came in the wrong key. And when we got back into the dressing room, he was telling me off. I was about 16, 17, something like that. And of course, when you're 16 or 17, you know everything, don't you? It's only as you get older you realise you don't. So I told him off, and he puffed off in a fit of temper. And Rhett Stoller, who was an old hand at playing guitar and playing big northern clubs, said, look, he said, I know you weren't playing incorrectly. They said, Jess probably knows, you know. He said, but he's paying your wages.
Right.
So it's not a good idea to fall out with him. which is good advice, really. Yeah.
So just agree with him. Let me ask you this. Speaking of comedians, this image just popped into my mind. What's the guy's name, the British comedian that would always wear the fez hat?
Tommy Cooper.
Yes.
I can tell you a good Tommy Cooper story if you'd like one.
Sure, yes.
A friend of mine, Parry Jarman, was the drummer of a band that was due to back him at a local night spot. And he was supposed to turn up for a band call in the afternoon, didn't come. And he was supposed to turn up a period of time before he was due, and he didn't come. And they went to this place about 2 miles away, a hotel, and he was drunk on the bed. So they woke him up and they gave him loads of coffee, and they brought him to the gig, and he was very funny. He always was very funny, and he was just Tommy. He could walk on stage and be funny without doing anything. Like Spike Milligan could do nothing and still be funny. And after the gig, somebody came and into Parry's dressing room and said, "Are you the leader of the band?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Well, Mr. Cooper would like to have a word with the leader of the band." So Parry thought, what's this all about? He went into his dressing room. Tommy Cooper was facing the mirror with all the lights around it. Didn't turn around. He said, "Are you the leader of the band?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Do you think you did a good job tonight?" And he said, "Well, it would have been better if we'd had a band call. I didn't ask you about a band call." He said, "I asked you, did you think we did you did a good job. I want to know, did you do a good job? And Parry said, yes, we did. And he turned around and shook him by the hand. And he said, I think you did a good job too. But it was about that time that Tommy Cooper started, if he got in a taxi, when he got out, he put something in the top pocket of the taxi driver and say, have a drink on me. And it was a tea bag.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow. Yeah, it's sad how he died. Yeah, that was something. But that's a good story. Okay, let's mention your second book that I wanted to mention, In the Autumn of My Madness. I think I have an idea what this one's about, but would you like to shed a little light on the book?
Well, I wanted to write a book which drew on the experiences I had from the end of Bark's Day in Ronkers until when I wrote it. And some people that I've worked with said, oh, I don't want to be in a book. I don't want you to mention me. I don't want to do this. So I presented it as fiction, but there are quite a lot of real people in there. And in fact, one guy who read it said, I think this band, the Digits, are probably the Fingers. And I think this band, Fable, is probably Legend. So he'd obviously spotted a few things. But I also wanted to use the title In the Autumn of My Madness, which was a Procol Harum record. And I was in contact with Roland Clare, who was the joint webmaster of Procol Harum's website. And I asked him if Gary would mind me using that, Gary Brooker, and he didn't at all. I knew Gary from the Shades, and I've met him a few times since then at various gigs. The last time I saw Gary, who, as you know, has recently passed away, was at a benefit gig for a very, very good drummer called Mickey Brownlee that was in a band with me and Vic Collins for a long time, called Hunt, Run, Shunt and Cunning, doing rock and roll and country and a little bit of light jazz. And Gary came along, and he had his band No Stiletto Shoes with him that basically play Paramount stuff, you know, that kind of era. Very, very good. And Andy Fairweather-Low's in the band, so he's got good company there. And you probably know that Gary and Andy Fairweather-Low were both in Eric Clapton's band for a while. In fact, Andy still plays with Eric as well. So we had that. It was Hunt, Run, Shunt and Cunning, and there was a couple of guys singing, and one of our friends, Johnny Hazeltine, came up and sang. He's a good rock and roll singer. And Andy Fairweather-Low did a separate section, which is basically with No Stiletto Shoes, but with Andy singing. And in fact, Gary did actually say to me, well, where's Juppy? You know, it would have been nice if he'd come to Nicky's thing, but it's a long way to come. But Nicky Brownlee was a very good drummer, and he in the time that I was working with him for a long time, he was a car salesman. So he always had new jokes every week. Very funny guy. Very, very good drummer.
Okay. So any other little tidbits in that book that you'd like to mention, In the Autumn of My Madness? Any other little anecdotes?
Well, I mean, it covers a long period of time, and one of the bands that's mentioned in there is The New Beginnings. Well, that's really the management, of course, you know. So we formed that band in 2013. Yes, 2013. We started to go out gigging in 2014, about April, March, sometime like that. And in fact, the singer in that band at the time was a guy called Russ Chant, who was in one of the bands that used to support us in the Fingers. So again, this is a small world. He left. We were doing pretty much the same kind of repertoire we're doing now, sort of early, say from mid 50s to early 70s stuff. So a huge range of really good songs to choose from. Really, really good. And Russ decided, we played in a horrible venue. I won't mention the name of the place, but it was a pub. As you walked along, the carpet stuck to your feet. And they had loads of blokes in there on a Sunday lunchtime who just wanted to get drunk. A few girls who didn't want to be there, but had been forced to go there by their husbands. We asked them where a power point was. It was 12 feet up on a wall, and we had to get a ladder to plug the gear in. So it was not one of our favourite gigs. And Russ phoned me the next day and said, I'm leaving. And I said to him, well, what are you going to do? He said, we're going to form a band and we're going to do Crosby, Stills and Nash stuff. So I said, great. Good luck to you. I said, what do you mean? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you're going to spend weeks and weeks and weeks learning complicated stuff, really good harmonies. And will you get to work? Probably not, because the stuff we were playing was the stuff that gets the work. And we do a lot of clubs, our Royal British Legion clubs, conservative clubs, things like that. And by accident, the age range of the audience has grown with us. So they like 50s, 60s, and early 70s stuff. And we got a guy called Billy B, one of my good friends. I've been in various other bands with him. And I said to him, do you want to join the management? He said, okay, because I'm not doing anything at the moment. He said, what do you want me to do? And I said, well, there's our repertoire. I want you to do all those in those keys, in our arrangement, so we could just hit the ground running, which he did. And over the years, I've been very lucky to have been able to play with lots of people for a long time. There was one guy called Trevor Morgan, who is a very good singer, really good pianist. And he was in a band with Eric and I, Billy B, that's his stage name. And he said, oh, I'm doing some work for my nephew who's got a claims management company, and it's a bit stressful, I'm going to stop playing. And we said, oh, no, you've got that wrong. You're 72, you should be doing it around the other way. Keep playing, give up working. And we said to him, if you want, you could just play less. But he didn't want to. But I was in a band with him from 1978, with different people coming and going, to the end of 2011. So although I've been in lots of different bands, sometimes you had people coming and going and different names and things like that. So
yes. In all the years that you've been playing, what was the smallest audience that you had? And then what was the largest audience that you played for?
I would say probably the largest audience might have been the Beat 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 thing, or maybe at the Cliffs. There's quite a few people there. The Cliffs has been extended now, but I reckon there was probably 1,200 people in some of the Cliffs gigs. So it was a reasonable sized theatre. The smallest audience, one gig we did with the management, was in a pub, a local pub. And most of the people were in another room. So every now and then they drift in to watch this. And there were two young kids, teenagers, kicking an iPhone around the floor because they thought it was funny. And the landlady, who was rather frightening, really, to be honest with you, rather fierce, came and shouted at them. And I thought they were going to tell her to go away in uncertain terms, but they backed off. But it was a grim gig. And on the way out, I packed my stuff in the car and I was going out, and she knocked on the window, and I put out the window, and she said, I like the band, great band. She said, did you enjoy the gig? I said, well, you've got one or two people in the pub that are a bit rough. She said, no, that's wrong. She said, they're all rough. So we're actually quite picky where we play now. We're of an age where we like to play to nice people, nice places, and I get all the gigs and I handle all the PR, and I actually sometimes say to the entertainment secretaries that I know they've got a very difficult job, and inevitably they say, why? And I say, because you've got to book a band every Saturday for a year, for example, And whatever kind of band you get in, you get a band that says, I don't like country and western, I don't like 60s music, I don't like this, I don't like that. And I said to them, the only thing you can do is to put a mixture of groups on different kinds of music. And most of them are actually quite astounded that I'm sympathizing with them, but
Yeah.
and of course the other thing is we did do a gig with Salty Dog. I'll tell you about this. We had lots of gigs over a period of about 3 years, maybe 5 or 6 nights a week, and we played at Stevenage Locarno, and we were sort of a cabaret band. We did lots of harmony stuff, and it was quite a classy band, really. After the first set, the manager came to see us and he said, you're a great band. He said, thank you. I said, there's a buck coming, isn't it? He said, yes. He said, but you're not going down very well. He said, because this crowd likes disco music. He said, you don't do any disco stuff, do you? And we said, no. He said, do you mind if we pay you all your money and you can pack up and go home? But that's the only time in over 60 years that I've been paid off and told to go home. So
Really?
that's not too bad, really.
Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah. Well, it's like, well, you just didn't, get the money, and that's kind of an easy out. You have to perform on that one. But yeah, there's always those people that are going to be critical or say like, can you play something different or than that you normally play?
Well, one place we played, the entertainment secretary said, I've been going around asking people what they think of your band. It was the first time we played there. She said, they all say they really like it. She said, these people behind me, she just nodded her head backwards. She said, they always moan and they never dance. And I said, they've been clapping and singing and tapping their feet and dancing all night. She said, I know. I'm surprised. And she then said, I'd like to book you again. Can you come back and play all disco music? And I said, well, no. She said, you can do that, can't you? I said, yeah, we can do that, but we're not that kind of band. You know that we do basically 60s, a bit of 50s and a bit of 70s. And if we actually had to learn all disco music just for one gig, it's maybe 45 songs. And so why would we want to do that?
Right.
But there you go. But I must admit, actually, there's a new person doing the bookings there now, and they're booking it still. So I can't be glad.
Well, we'll talk about that. Must keep you pretty busy too. You said you do the PR and everything, and
yeah, we've just got a new website as well. I think I gave you the address for that, and we brought in a new chap called Les Titford, who's got a huge YouTube channel of him playing all sorts of funny things like melodeons and doll sisters and strange instruments. But his things have been seen by about 5.5 million people.
Wow.
But I said, because I knew him from a long time ago, and I said, do you fancy joining the management? And he said, yes. He said, but I haven't played live for a long time because I've been heavily involved in teaching and various other things, music teaching. And but he's very good. His work ethic is faultless. If we say to him, let's learn a song, in about 10 minutes you get the song sheet with all the chords, all the lyrics, and all the harmonies worked out.
Wow.
So he's really committed. He's a good guy and a nice bloke as well. But he said he remembers when I was in Legend, he used to see me in a local shop, and he's maybe 5 or 6 years younger than I am. And he said, when I was a snot-nosed kid, I kind of looked up at you because you were recording albums and playing with Mickey Jupp. And he said, you were really nice to me. And I said, well, it's probably just as well, really. And he said, why is that? And I said, because you wouldn't have joined my band otherwise.
Right.
But what we like about this band is that they're all very good musicians. They're all really nice guys. We've all worked in bands where at least one person is a little tricky. And at our age, it's sort of 26 and a bit. Why would you want to work with people that are difficult to work with? There's no point. We just want to enjoy it.
Right. So it sounds like there's a lot of good chemistry there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Wow. So what, how busy, how many, how often do you play gigs, would you say?
We've scaled it down a bit. We do about 25 a year,
Mhm.
which if you compare it to Juppy's 1 or 2, is not bad. Um, we, we we quite like rehearsing. Some
Mhm.
bands don't like rehearsing. We quite enjoy it. We get together, we have a laugh, we have a drink and some cakes or something, to learn some good numbers and swap a
Right.
few jokes. So it's a friendly band as well.
Right. Right.
And so a guy came up to us the other day who hadn't seen us before, and he said, your band exudes good humor. He said, you can
Mhm.
see that you really like working together. He
Right.
said, you often see a band on stage looking as if they're going to have a fight, or looking daggers at each other. But
Daggers.
I mean, obviously, it's it's a boon playing with good people that are
Mhm.
friendly and are good musicians as well. So
Mhm.
we really enjoy that.
Just having a good time.
Yeah, that's right. And
Yeah.
I mean, we've got about 26 or 27 gigs in the book at the moment,
Mhm.
including 15 for next year. And
Uh-huh.
it's only August, so I mean,
That's
it's not
good.
bad, is it? And we've got several others in the pipeline. And we're quite lucky because although we play in different places, we see different people turning up in the same people turning up in different
Yeah.
places. And
Yeah.
we do some charity gigs as well, which is nice.
Good.
We did one the other day for Kidney Care UK. That's a charity that looks after people with chronic kidney disease. And we had a good girl singer called Julie Jive as our support act, and we raised over £1,000 for charity. So
That's great.
so these
Yeah.
guys don't mind doing that as well. They're nice. They're nice guys to actually want to do that to help charities as well.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead and plug the charities that you helped with your books too.
Yeah. Well, Barkstave Ronkers, that raised money for Cancer Research UK. And the next one, the Royal Worms, I did that for Greek Animal Rescue and Little Havens Children's Hospice. At the time, I was also a trustee of Havens Hospices. And the one after that was When the Pongs Go Ping. I think that was for NHS Charities Together. I get a bit confused about which one was which now. Um, the most recent one is I'm Back, and that was back to cancer research. But the management have raised about £5,000 for charities with our charity gigs. I've had various different musical projects where we've asked people to sponsor bands and things like that. I did one called the Juppathon, where I asked bands to play a Mickey Jupp song anytime in a period of 6 months, anywhere, and to either just donate something or get somebody to sponsor them to do that. And we had people like Dr. Feelgood involved in that,
Uh-huh.
and the Ugly Guys, which is two of the guys from Curl the Flyers were in there, and that raised quite a bit of money. But with those side projects and with the books, I've raised about another £8,000. So I think it's a nice thing to do.
Yeah,
I'm
I
also a
think so.
charity for two. I'm a trustee for 2 local charities as well. So I
Yeah.
keep myself busy. So
Right. Right. I think it's a really admirable, noble thing to do. I really do.
thank you.
Anybody that's involved in charity work, I think it's needs a pat on the back, right?
Thank you.
I think for sure. I think for sure. Well, what's on the immediate horizon for the management? Would you say what's coming
Uh,
up?
on the immediate horizon, we've actually got a month off because
Okay.
everybody's taking various different holidays. But
Mhm.
then we hit the ground running again in October with 3 gigs, which
Mhm.
is quite nice. And they are the kind of gigs that we do most often. We do functions as well. Functions, you probably know, are hard work for a band because you have to get there really early before people have their dinner. quite often they say the dinner will finish at 9:30 and you'll start playing at 9:30. It never happens, particularly when they've got awards to give out or speeches. So you then end up playing, and sometimes you end up not playing that long, but then the gig's over and people saying, "Are you going home already?" And you might have been there about 6 or 7 hours. Whereas with a club, you can go there sort of early evening, pack up at 11:30, and we quite like it. And we're actually very lucky because we play mainly in southeast Essex, so we don't even have to travel very far. And as you said, at our mature age, we want to just enjoy it, which is a good thing. So.
Right. I think that's great. And everyone that I've talked to, musicians, they have that in their blood, so I think it's just something that's got to come out no matter how old you are. I think they're going to be playing forever, if they can. And
well, during the COVID pandemic, I'd never done any home recording. And I bought myself a Steinberg recording kit, with a digital audio warehouse and bits and pieces and software and everything. And my friend Trevor, the guy that I talked to you about, who's a good pianist I played with for a very long time, he was using Cubase, good software. And he said that he'd basically try and tell me how to use it over the phone. And he said, "I can't come and see you. I'm not allowed to come and see you. It would be so easy if I could sit with you and say, you do this and you do that." But I had various people sending me stuff. And I think I recorded about 40 bass tracks for people, various different people. Some of them were people I didn't know very well. Some of them were just for my own amusement. And a couple of them we put out as musical projects. And one of them was with an ex-member of the management and a good pianist who played with this guy. And we put out this song. We did a charity Just Giving page and said, if people listen to this, can you just donate money to East Anglian children's hospices? So, so we managed to keep myself fairly busy there. And actually, during the last lockdown, I wrote another book as well, which was I'm Back. That's the latest book. That's the one about the guy who's artificially reincarnated and falls in love with a sexy robot. What can possibly go wrong?
Right. I like that. What could go wrong? What could happen here? Yeah, that's interesting too, because I've heard that the lockdown was kind of a mixed blessing in a way, because it kind of forced people, like in your case, to write or to home record or to write music,
Yeah.
So it was kind of, in a way, it was kind of a good thing.
Yeah, that's right. I did a few tracks with an old friend of mine called Frank Dawkins. He's a very, very good guitarist. He works in the West End theatres and does touring shows as well. And he's normally in the pit, so he likes to get out and do a bit of rock and roll now and again. But he puts down some really good guitar stuff. And funny enough, I first knew him not very well when he used to come see the Fingers in the 60s. So
Really?
it's right back to then, But he's a very good guitarist. I actually said to him, "Did anything amusing happen when you were in the pit?" And he said he was doing the Jersey Boys once. And there's a piece in it where he has to play sitar. It's a guitar with a sitar effect. And he forgot to put the effect on. And I said, "Did anybody notice?" He said, "Nobody in the audience noticed at all. But the other guitarist in the pit noticed and was laughing like mad." You can imagine, can't you? But he's a nice guy, Frank. He's done lots of work. He's worked with the Drifters and all sorts of well-known people. So.
Wow.
In fact, the sax player of Hunt Run Shunt and Cunningham, a bloke called Graham Turner, who's a very, very good sax player. He's played with the Drifters and he's played with Elkie Brooks and Alison Moyet and loads of well-known people. He phoned up Tony, the pianist of Hunt Run Shunt and Cunningham, and says, "I can't play at the pub on Friday." He said, "Well, why is that?" He said, because I'm playing with the Drifters. Tony said, that's a weak excuse. But I asked Graham, I said, is that the real Drifters? He said, it depends what you mean. He said, it's not a tribute act. It is the real Drifters. But the Drifters have been going for, say, 55 years with 50 people all round the other way. And obviously Benny King and Johnny Moore and all the original people are long gone.
Right.
He said, but it is the real Drifters. But in talking to Frank, the guy I was just talking to, he said he did actually do a tour with the Drifters when Benny King and Johnny Moore were actually in the band. So
Is that right?
he had to hear the best of both worlds, really.
Is that right? Wow. Some good stories there. So,
Well, I started playing when I was 12.
right.
And wasted really my grammar school education. I could have done a lot better if I hadn't been rehearsing and playing and learning new numbers. And of course, then it was that much more difficult to learn to play bass because the drums and the bass were mixed quite low in 50s and 60s records.
Yeah.
And we used to have this trick where you'd put a 45 on a record player, a dance set player or something like that, and play it at 78 so you could hear the bass because it was higher. Then, of course, you needed to transpose it to play it in the right key. But I wouldn't have had it any other way. I just love playing, you know, and as I said to you, it's the camaraderie and the banter, and this is where my friend Rick, Daddy Lindbergh, is missing out, you know, because he likes interacting with the audience, he likes playing, he likes singing, but he said it's just not the same as being in a band.
It's not.
Really. I think really there's a different kind of success in playing and enjoying something. That's a good type of success, isn't it? I mean, okay, perhaps it would have been nice to get hit records apart from that one small one we had. Perhaps it would have been nice to earn a little bit more money. But then you see there are people that we can all remember that have died from drug overdoses or alcoholism or have had various other problems or no longer around, you know, I'm still playing, so can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, that's true. You're a survivor, hey? Right? Well, I do appreciate it, John. Thank you again, John, and we'll be talking to you again soon, all right?
Okay, it's nice talking to you anyway.
All right, bye-bye.